and you relive it every day.
The overall aim of the Break the Silence project is to reduce the prevalence of child sexual abuse and incest and implications for risky sexual behavior that lead to HIV/AIDS throughout Trinidad and Tobago. There are three main objectives. The first is to generate new gender-sensitive knowledge and understanding of child sexual abuse and incest and implications for HIV/AIDS. The second objective of this project, which is to empower women, men, boys and girls in communities throughout Trinidad and Tobago to address issues of child sexual abuse and implications for HIV/AIDS. The third objective is to enhance and revise policies and procedures that address child sexual abuse and incest.
This project was funded by UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, and also by the United Nations Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women. And both of these agencies were concerned that this project not just be a research project, but also a research action project, something that would also have some impact on the communities in Trinidad and Tobago.
Action research is gathering data while empowering people of the community through some type of program.
What we tried to do was to collaborate with an NGO that we felt had greater credibility and experience in communities to work alongside us to ensure that the academic component of the project was able to reach out to the wider society and community. And we selected the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, which interestingly also has a project which is entitled Childline, where children can call Childline to get support or to request assistance with problems that are facing them. So we felt that, bearing in mind that this research was on child sexual abuse and incest, that the coalition was a very useful partner for us to work with.
Part of the project involved working in the communities, and that's where I think CDV has played its major role. Because as an NGO we have done work in communities before, I suspect as well that the funders intuitively know that an NGO would be very interested in leaving something with the community, as differentiated from IGDS, who is more focused on the research. So we were able to strike a balance via this partnership. We were able to leave information to educate the communities even as we got the research data.
For quite some time now, at the center, as we called it in those days, there's a feeling that we needed to do research on sexualities, gender and sexualities, because we felt that this was an area which there was not enough local research, not enough understanding, and we needed first of all to understand what the sexual practices were, the taboos, etc., but also how gender affected those practices.
So we, for 3 months, gathered all of that information and data on people's perceptions and attitudes. And from that information, what we did was we said, okay, it seems the overall preliminary findings, again, since we haven't had the time to really look and go through everything, was that it is a problem. It's a major problem. Everyone is saying, help.
In the conceptualization of that project, we decided to bring together a group of stakeholders. That group included feminist activists, social workers, policymakers, people from various government departments, and we discussed the issues, we put it out to them, and emerging from the discussion was the issue of incest.
Mommy, Uncle said it would be touching her. What? You understand what you're saying, young lady?
Incest, of course, is not normally an issue you discuss when you deal with sexualities. But we felt that clearly this was a need, it had come up from the stakeholders, and therefore we should address it.
I don't know what to believe. You're always lying now.
But mommy, I am not lying!
How am I supposed to know that?
One of our researchers, Dr. Santa Reid, she and others have found that survivors of incest are at high risk for what for want of a better word, can be called risky sexual behavior in later years. So that some of the psychological results of that early traumatic experience can manifest later. For example, in multiple partnerships, inability to develop long-term intimacy, etc. And these are all the things that we know contribute to increased HIV risk among young people.
And we want to have one more vote because we have one more set of information. And that is, Charlene was never physically touched as a child. She was peeped at, exposed to exhibitionism. We know what is exhibitionism, all right? Somebody exposing themselves. Forced to look at pornography for a number of years by different family members. Is that child sexual abuse?
Child sexual abuse has a severely detrimental impact on personality development and later adult behaviors. Persons who have been sexually abused tend to be much more impulsive, risk takers than persons who have not been. So you find therefore that as adults, they are more likely to use alcohol and drugs. They are more likely to engage in risky sexual behaviors. That alone increases the risk of HIV. Then you have the issue of self-esteem and their sense of self. People who have been sexually abused grow up with very, very low self-esteem and a sense of insecurity. These are the persons who engage in more non-heterosexual behaviors, right? These are also the persons who, because of their low self-esteem, tend to end up in abusive relationships with controlling men. And of course, these are the women, if it's a female who has been sexually abused, who have less capacity to negotiate for condom use because their self-efficacy in terms of sexual behavior is so low and is so poor. So that increases the risk of HIV infection by virtue of their low self-esteem and their sense of self. Then the whole issue of relationships. When you've been a victim of child sexual abuse, you learn not to trust. You learn not to trust the people who say they love you. You learn not to trust the people who you know should care about you. And that is a recipe for disastrous relationships.
There was this one woman I remember, she was in her 50s, looked like any other person you'd see, you know, she was married, she had some children. And she started to tell me about some experiences she had had in her youth. I knew she had a husband because I'd seen him, she'd introduced me to him, but I didn't realize that they hadn't been married that very long. And she told me, you know, this is somebody who had known her for nearly her entire life and had always stood by her, but she couldn't commit to him. She kept thinking that she would never be good enough for him, so that the children she had weren't his. She had 5 children with 5 different men. And because she always thought that would be the fathers of these children would be the kind of men she deserved, because she'd been violated repeatedly by different men as a child and just thought she wasn't deserving. As a matter of fact, she tested HIV positive, and as she put it, in a moment of weakness, she told this man who she had known her entire life and who supported her, and so she eventually married him. But you know, when you hear her talk about those years, you realize, and even though she's married him, she still doesn't think she deserves him.
we have identified in Trinidad and Tobago and in the wider world community high-risk groups of persons. So if we're talking about Trinidad, we're talking about commercial sex workers, we're talking about men who have sex with men, crack cocaine addicts, specifically female crack cocaine addicts, and I think there have been pieces of research that have pointed to psychiatric patients and women who have experienced interpersonal violence. These are the people who have been described as the high-risk groups. When you look at research that describes these groups, you see one factor that keeps popping up all the time, and that is child sexual abuse. So what we are finding then is that while prevention efforts look at behaviors of these groups and trying to change the behaviors, nobody has really looked at some of the more causative associations to change from that level of causation, that is child sexual abuse.
Communities also want you to note that child sexual abuse cannot only happen between males and females, but also there's a lot of sexual abuse from adult males and young males. And of course, there's even the idea that sexual abuse is also possible with adult females and young males.
But when you look at the myths that abound in our society, one of the more prevalent myths that thankfully has since changed is the belief that HIV positive men who have sex with virgins will be cured. So when you combine that biological vulnerability with the fact that an HIV positive man may be more likely to become a perpetrator if he believes that myth, you see that children who are sexually abused, their HIV risk is significantly high.
This model was very adaptive. In the beginning, we had one idea of what the model would be. We were supposed to identify 3 communities, go to each community about 3 times or 4 times over an extended period to have an intervention. At that time,
we went into 3 pilot communities, 2 in Trinidad and 1 in Tobago. And we had researchers gather information from community members themselves on what their perceptions and attitudes were toward child sexual abuse and incest.
In each of the 3 communities, we heard the same thing. Come in, yes, we would love to have you, yes, we see the need for this information.
Our idea also as well was that each community would have the same intervention. When we actually went out to the communities, however, we had to adjust our thinking on this, because the communities had different things in mind. They had different needs, they had different demands, different circumstances, different cultures. And as a result, we ended up with different activities in each community. So what we had was a series of interventions tailor-made for each community.
There was education workshops as one part of these models that were in all 3 communities, and then there was also skills building workshops. Community members across all 3 communities said, along with educating, you need to help us learn skills on how to address these issues so that after you leave, we have some way of continuing the work on our own. So what we did is create workshops such as parent support groups, where we taught parents issues. We educated them about child sexual abuse and incest. We also taught them skills on how to speak to their own children about sexuality, speak to their own children about sexual rights, speak to their own children about the implications of promiscuity. We worked with victims of child sexual abuse, adults, women in particular, that said we need a forum, a space to just talk to one another. So we again formed these groups where we educated them about child sexual abuse and incest, and we taught them skills on how to facilitate their own peer support groups. And now what's going on is after the interventions have been completed, they have gone on and continued the work on their own. They now have the skills to facilitate their own peer support groups, and they're meeting on their own after work at night, talking to one another, speaking out, empowering each other. Another skill that we taught was crisis intervention skills for teachers in particular. ways to deal with children that just have these signs of child sexual abuse and incest. How do you deal with the issues? How do you deal with children that are acting out, that are seeking out help, but you're not sure what to do? Issues like that. The final component of the model, the general model that we created, along with education and skills building, was to create some type of support service. Again, I think this is related to the peer support groups that we helped create to empower the community members, and also we did hold some family days where there was counseling and general health testing.
We didn't go into the community and say we are here to do this. We invited their input, we asked for their suggestions, we told them what the overall aims and objectives of the project were, and asked what would work best in your community to really inform and educate people. And that strategy, I think, got buy-in from day one, so that many people in each of the communities really owned the activities and the programs that we put on.
What is also important is that for the community-based interventions, we were able to use Arts in Action, which is a UWI theater in education organization. And using Arts in Action, we were able to draw on their skills for community work of theater in education, for working in the communities, and that was really interesting and really exciting.
So we have a song that tells you who we are, what we do, and why we do what we do. You want to hear the song? Yes. Are they sure they want to hear the song? Yes. Good, but we'll bring the song first.
We would usually go into communities and put on a play, a short play, which would be like 5 to 7 minutes long, after which we'd employ theatre and education techniques to talk about the issues. By talk I mean individuals would come up and assume roles, or they would give suggestions and see their suggestions played back. What we found is that men are a hard target to reach in this particular manner. They're very least likely to come out to town meetings, and they're the least likely to take part in those kinds of activities. So we had to go to them, and that would mean getting them in bars where they usually hang out, or if they play basketball or cricket. After considering that, we decided that for the men, we would try invisible theatre. During the whole course of the performance, you'd get a sense of the behaviors and attitudes towards the particular issue.
In a fine castle, do you hear my CCO? In a fine castle, do you hear my CCO?
We did secondary school workshops. That would be theatre and education activities. We would create scenarios, 3 different scenarios that would address different aspects of the theme, child sexual abuse and implications for HIV/AIDS. We would present these scenarios to the young people, after which we would ask them questions about the characters, the situations, after which they would be invited to share information with one of the characters to change the situation or create a better outcome.
Mommy, Uncle Cecil, hello?
No, he going to work, you know that?
Good.
This place in a mess. Help me clean the place, y'all.
Mommy, I can't be home and Uncle Cecil home again.
Why not? Charlie, I tell you, go to work just now. If you have something to say, just say it now.
Mommy, Uncle Cecil will be touching now.
What? You understand what you're saying, young lady? Why are you so ungrateful? He putting a roof over our head. He putting food on the table.
Mommy, you hear what I'm telling you? Mommy, Uncle Cecil is interfering with me.
Little girl, of late I find your behavior has been very disturbing. You're lying, you're coming home late, you with all kind of man all over the
Because
place.
I agree with him, Mommy, and I'm not lying to you. Why would I lie for something like that?
Do you understand what you're saying?
What are you hearing what I'm telling you?
I don't believe this. I think you're out of place. You're out of order. What happened to you? I don't know what to believe. You're always lying now.
But mommy, I am not lying.
How am I supposed to know that?
Uncle Cecil and lied to the mother and the mother believed it.
Uncle Cecil raped the little girl. And the mother don't believe him.
The young people that we interacted with, some of them showed the same attitudes and behaviors we found in the bar. In fact, you're seeing where it starts in the secondary schools. A lot of them sometimes have the right answer. They know exactly what to tell you about the topic. But you know, I mean, as a facilitator, you sense when it's the right answer and there's a disconnect between what they know and how they behave.
You're feeling violated and you relive it every day. Maybe it just happened once, or each day you hit replay. Your pillow holds your secrets but offers no advice. So the tears you shed in silence, is your heart paying the price? There's no shame in what you're feeling. There is an open door. It's time to start the healing and become the you lost before. Talk to me now, I am here. It's alright, you're not alone. I know you're scared, humiliated. You feel all hope is gone, so take my hand, it's here to hold. I am right here, you can talk to me right now. When nothing makes sense, it's up to you to break the silence.
Could not document everything at the beginning, and we could not put things out at the beginning because it's a taboo sort of issue, and we had to go very slowly, but which has been really good.
But invade your private space.
So we developed different tools for the people running workshops. We did drawing cards, comment cards, cards that they could write poetry on. Then after people grabbed it and felt comfortable with it, and we got feedback and started to identify with it, we embarked on a very large national poster campaign. The posters going to schools through Childline and to health centers, community centers, and all sort of social service units all over the country. When we came up with the teddy bear symbol, we really felt that we wanted to become, this 20 years, 50 years from now, the symbol of child abuse, and more specifically child sexual abuse in Trinidad and Tobago, and even in the region. We were thinking in a broad way of a campaign that could really have long-term value. So the teddy bear is a universal symbol that represents love and care, and people immediately see a teddy bear and they have some notion of love and care.
That has had a really significant impact, we hope, on reducing the stigma, because here you now have a tangible, empathic symbol to identify with.
The blue teddy bear has a plaster on its heart, which then signals healing and hope. So we don't want to have a sort of non-hopeful feeling. We wanted to have a feeling of hope. It could be understood by people of all ages and genders. It's also genderless. It's not male or female. And also it just has a reference to loving and caring. So it's a symbol that we thought could work for child sexual abuse.